John, two amazing ladies there from the hospice, the Southern Area Hospice, that house of caring on the hill up just outside, heading out of Newry, Courtney Hill, down off Abbey Yard in Newry. Two amazing people, as I say, and wonderful to get that sense of caring, because very often when we do a story on hospice, the only thing we're getting is the detail of how much is needed and how it's been raised and the thank you for the checks, that kind of thing. But it's gone beyond that when you have someone of the caring profession coming in, sitting with you and having a chat with you and telling you what social worker, senior social worker has to do in the hospice, and it makes a lot of sense. I have with me, you're listening to Destination Newry, you're tuned into it, you're watching it all across the world. I'm Rowan Hand, this is The Morning Show, and on The Morning Show next is Renee Murphy. How are you?
Good morning, Rowan, how are you?
It's good to have you here, I'm
Thank
fine.
you.
And you're a woman that would not be out of place in Moldova, in the centre of Europe, because
That's right.
you're part and parcel of, you're a caring woman who has outreached in the past with the charity Outreach Moldova, and you're working voluntarily there to help orphans.
That's right, yes. We have over 300 orphans in the place I go to. They're not actually, some of them are just children who've been abandoned. The main common thread through it is that they all have special needs. And the special needs would vary from being something quite minor to being other problems that are pretty horrendous and are difficult. You know, these children need a lot of care, they need a lot of love. It takes a lot of money to keep the orphanage running. So
When did you first go?
I first went there in 2004, 9 years ago.
It wasn't, you weren't actually going to a beautiful part of the world to meet with beautiful people initially. You're a fairly difficult regime there to handle, and then you're into a part of the world that's primitive in a sense, and young people, children who are severely challenged. All of this was hammering on your head and your heart. It wasn't easy.
It wasn't. The first couple of years, I must say, were particularly difficult for several reasons. One, it was something that I was quite new to, although I had children with special needs in my playgroup over the years in Warren Point. But the other thing was that it was hard to see the conditions they were in then compared with now. I mean, it was only in its infancy. Outreach Moldova, the charity that I work with, just began in 2000, so there was still an awful lot of work to be done. The girls at that stage, most of them had no medical records. They weren't given any medication other than sedatives for the ones that weren't chained to beds or beaten to a sleep, you know. It was quite difficult, but it's a much happier story now.
What was the initial point of contact, that trip over moment, that allowed the Warren Point woman, Renee Murphy, to say, this I want to do? What was that crazy moment in your life that changed everything for you?
It was strange, actually. I was working down in Tullamore at the time, and I had, on the Monday morning in the paper, I'd seen a little ad. This was back in autumn 2003, and it said, would you have 2 weeks to spare in summer 2004 to work with children with disability? And I sort of skipped through part of the ad and carried on reading the paper, and then the following day the same thing happened and the ad was there. And on the Tuesday I remember thinking, gosh, I wonder where Moldova actually is. I knew it was away over there in Eastern Europe, but I couldn't place it. And then on the Wednesday I realised that you had to raise a minimum of €1,600 to cover expenses and to give some money to the orphanage. And at that stage I had saved €1,600 for my next trip to Australia. So conscience doth make cowards of us all, and by the Friday I had just decided, right, that's it, maybe that's what I'm meant to do with this money. So that was how it started.
That's how it started. And your arrival at that beginning in Moldova, at the orphanage, talk me through the moment of shock, perhaps.
It was shock, Rowan. It was arriving in Moldova itself, in Chisinau, was quite awful, because the staff at the airport, they were very frightening to look at, and occasionally they would take somebody off into a room to check something, and they wanted to know what money you had, and they'd spend 5 minutes looking at your passport, not speaking to you, and this was going on. You think, I'm going to end up in jail here, and I haven't even done anything. And then we had the coach. Well, in those days it wasn't as grand as a coach. It was a little rickety old bus that took us about 45 minutes southwest of Chisinau to the Hinchest, where the orphanage is based. And it was quite sort of barren terrain. I wasn't quite sure what I was letting myself in for. And the orphanage is set quite high up, not on a mountain, but up on a hill. And then when the little coach stopped in the grounds, all these children that were mobile, a lot of them obviously are in wheelchairs, but a lot of them that were mobile came racing towards us, and they were pulling and dragging and, you know, jumping up on us and everything. And I was practically frightened at that stage.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
of course it was the way of life. They were so excited that these people were coming from Ireland. It was just amazing.
And to what extent would they have known that you were? They would have known you were different. You were a stranger, but that you were coming out from Ireland to help them.
Some of them understood it. Most of them didn't. Most of them didn't realise what it was about. Just it was something that was different from their daily routine, and therefore it was nice to have a change. And initially it was rather strange with the staff who were there, who in those days worked for a pittance. I mean, the wages in general in Moldova are very low and still are, but in those days the staff had it in their heads that these rich Irish people were coming out to take their jobs. So they resented us too. It took a while for everything to sort of dovetail and fall into place.
But what was the human carpentry of that dovetailing? You don't dissuade people of that false notion by politeness. Had you simply to sit them down, eyeball them, and have the conversation?
Yes, except that it wasn't us, the volunteers, who did that, because obviously at that stage my Romanian wasn't existent, and I still don't have very much. Romanian is the language they speak, although they call it Moldovan, but basically it is Romanian. But Suzanne O'Connell, the Dublin doctor who has given her life literally up to running the orphanage, I think she finally got through to them. Look, these people are here to help. They're bringing money, they're bringing clothes for the children, they're making your life a bit easier by playing with the children, by feeding the ones that take maybe 2 hours to have one meal, you know.
And was that a foreign concept for those professionals who were there? Is it in the Moldovan character to understand that people can be that altruistic?
It was difficult. The Moldovan psyche is that everybody's, you know, because they're so downtrodden, and they're such, I mean, officially they're the poorest country in Europe. They're so downtrodden, they feel that everybody's going to take something from them rather than give something to them. Yeah. You know, but now it's different, and we get on great with the staff and that. Yeah.
So different in terms of the physicality of the place. That has changed through your efforts and the efforts of Outreach Moldova. What about the health situation of the people?
That has changed beyond belief.
Really?
I have children that in 2004 I was pushing around in wheelchairs. Several of them have had orthopaedic surgery and are now walking. In many cases, the children we had with disabilities only had a disability because of neglect at birth, or because of antenatal neglect as well, because there's little or no antenatal care. They just, people can't afford to have it, and therefore children were born with problems, and immediately after birth something could have been done, say with a child born with hydrocephalus or something like that, but there wasn't done. It was left too late, whatever. You know.
Shunt.
But the shunts. But so many of them now are just, obviously they're getting very good quality food. In fact, in some cases I would say they're much better fed than the average Moldovan child, which is rather sad. But yeah, they health-wise, it's a different place.
I saw you at the weekend. You were sitting in Warren Point inside the door of the super value place there, the Eurospar, and all you were missing was an orange robe, and the orange robe would have completed the picture and taken me back to the Buddhist monks of Thailand when I was 20, and so they were begging to survive. But here were you were silently begging by your presence for the children you love in Moldova.
I suppose, and I bring photographs along, and people ask me about the orphanage. Warrenpoint people have been, and indeed the surrounding area, they've been so supportive since I started to go. They really did, you know, always support me. And even last week, which was our festival week in Warrenpoint, and lots of other very worthy and perhaps more local charities were collecting, people still came and said, "Oh, Renee, this is your day," and popped in their money, which was great. So
Renee, is there... It's a very simple question, and I think the answer should be yes, but it's not for me to, and I've just done it, to put answers in your mouth. There's surely got to be a book about this in you. You've surely got to write your experiences down and have them published so that people can learn from you and go forward from you and continue the project.
I thought about that actually a few years ago, because sadly in 2006, while I was in Moldova, the night before I came home, my husband took a heart attack and died, and I came home the next day to a wake in my house, which was pretty awful. And at that stage I thought, wouldn't it be nice to put together a book and dedicate it to Brian, because he had been so supportive of me going there. He dreaded me going, actually,
of course.
but he was very supportive.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, Rowan, you know, everybody thinks they've got a book in them, and I looked into it, and there were sort of hurdles to overcome. If I was going to write about the children, we had to get clearance from the Moldovan government, and they don't like doing anything that they think might please the Irish, albeit that we're putting €1 million a year into the orphanage.
I know what you're saying.
But never say never.
I think so. Never say never, because that's it's a huge event of fundraising and awareness potential.
Yes, I suppose, really,
you know,
it is.
and I would almost suggest to you, you have a duty to do the book. And if it meant taking a year out and not raising money next year, but writing the book next year, might be the way forward. And now you're ideally placed to write a book overlooking the ocean, which is good.
Well, not exactly an ocean, but
well, sure.
the sea anyway.
The
but
sea.
Yes, it's something I've
to think
thought
about.
And
That. What does £1,000 do out there? Is it useful?
Oh, £1,000 does an awful lot, Rowan, because in actual fact it's cheaper to buy stuff out there. So we have a lot of diabetic children, and I had a businessman in Warrenpoint last year who gave me £500, and it bought new needles and all the things needed for the diabetics, you know, the little testers and everything. And the ordinary day-to-day running is a problem, because just buying, say, the winters in Moldova are very harsh, and just buying 300 and odd pairs of shoes for children, never mind coats.
How do you go about getting the right sizes?
Well, we do that over there.
Oh, you buy the shoes over there?
Yes, mostly we buy it, because it costs more to send a container out with stuff.
Of course it does,
Locally, people have been very kind, and some of the knitting groups have given me hand-knitted stuff, which is very useful in the winter. The winters are so cold. But in general, we prefer to buy the stuff out there, and if it's medical equipment, we would normally get it perhaps nearby in the Ukraine, but sometimes directly through to Moldova. But it covers guarantees better if it's bought there rather than bought in Ireland and sent out, you know.
Yeah. So the fundraising continues. What's your target for this year? Have you got a target?
Well, I haven't really. This year has been a bit of an up and down year for me, so I've only done one or two things. I'm hoping there will be one of the quizzes in the Canal Court before the end of the year.
I think it's good for people to focus and refocus on what they're doing with their money, because you kind of get complacent about charity and about helping and doing. It's only when you stop the world and get off for a moment and look at it dispassionately that you can actually say, my God, look what £500 has done. Look at those, and look at that, and you suddenly see it's not just a big figure, but there's lots of things, a consequence of that amount of money going in. It takes that.
Just briefly, Rowan, a gentleman here in Newry about 5 years ago very kindly gave me an electric wheelchair, which had been bought for a member of his family who died very soon afterwards. And I paid to have it sent out. One of our van people took it out. Now, it didn't actually suit our orphanage because of the way the grounds are, but it was passed on to a student in Chisinau University, a young man of 28. And the handing over of it was a major event in Moldova. It was the first electric wheelchair in the country. They couldn't believe that this thing could whiz around the university with this guy who couldn't walk. And the Minister for Families and whatever else they call her, she came along and presented it, and there was a whole to-do. So it just gives you an idea of the type of
Simple,
where they're
simple
at,
is huge.
where they're at, you know.
Simple is
the
huge.
first, there's 2 dialysis machines in the country. That's it.
Oh, goodness
The
gracious.
hospitals are scary. The hospitals are very, they have a big pot in the kitchen in the paediatric unit in our local hospital where they make stew and whatever for the meal, and then they wash the pot and boil the needles that they're going to use the next day. You know, that's the type of thing.
My goodness. What do you think of that?
The
I don't
toilet
know.
paper in the hospital is newspaper cut into neat squares.
Wow.
So it's
Reminds me of my holiday cottage in Black Rock 60 years ago. Ah, dear, oh dear,
God
oh
be with
dear.
the days, as
God
they
be with
say.
the days, indeed, indeed. Renee, it's a pleasure, as always, talking to you.
Thank you very much, and
And
thank you for
please,
giving me this
please
chance.
regard this studio as your home in outreaching to Moldova.
Thank you so
Anything
much.
you need done, we're here for you.
Thank you
Because
very
you
much
give,
indeed.
give, and you never take, and it's good that you're doing it.
Thank you.
God bless you. We can play you some music now from
That's
the
lovely.
great reservoir of musicality of Sean.